Hey everybody, Scott Wikle. You're listening to the original My Kind of Country right here on mkocradio.com. My guest tonight, there's really no way to prepare for this interview because you just don't know what direction he's going to go in. He is a master of impersonations, a comedian, an author, a country music songwriter, a motivational speaker, and you've seen him on so many fantastic shows, including Larry's Country Diner, the Country's Family Reunion, and of course the Grand Ole Opry. And he sent me a new song that has now become our opening song for our shows, and it's called I Hate Corporate Country. And I can't think of any better way to put it on our show because that's what we're all about. And it's a pleasure to have him on the show to talk about that song and his great career tonight. This is Johnny Counterfit. Johnny, how are you tonight?
Hi, Scott. Doing very well down here in Nashville, Tennessee. How are things in Michigan?
Things are nice and sunny here today. We're having a great summer.
That's good. This is a great time of year. I should be up there performing. However, I am talking with a promoter up there in Michigan, and he's talking to me about bringing my band up there and myself, of course, in December.
Oh, wow.
For 3 dates or so, and of course we'll be talking about that should it happen. I mean, it looks good. He asked me to set aside several dates, but I don't want to really go into it too much until the contract is signed, and I'll sure let you know about that.
Well, super, and we'll definitely promote the shows for you. And my best advice is to put some chains on your tires for your bus. You know.
Yeah, I questioned the about whether or not they're going to think about it 2 or 3 times about coming up there, and he says, "Oh, Michigan folks, they don't let that bother you. They just go on through the snow, and whatever happens, they'll make it there." So I said, "Okay."
Oh yeah, we're used to that up here. Well, we last year Mo Bandy was up here in December, and it was snowing pretty good, and they got a pretty good dose of it. But the year before, David Frizzell was here, and I kept telling him, "Man, it's going to be it could be nasty up here." We didn't have any snow, so. So
arrange that for me, will you?
Yeah, you might luck out this year. It seems to be every other year, so this is going to be a good year for that. I think you're good to go.
Great.
Well, I really appreciate you sending this song, and I led my show off last night with it, and I have an opening song that I play every time I do a live show, and this is going to be the new song that we're going to play every week because I absolutely love this. It's called "I Hate Corporate Country," and you wrote this song yourself, right?
Sir?
You wrote this one yourself, right?
Well, I did, yeah. It's something I finally got tired of hearing the things on radio a number of years ago that were not country, and I thought to myself, I just hate corporate country. And it just started flowing out of the pencil right then and there.
Well, it's a good song, and I love the line in there where you mentioned, that thank God for internet radio. That made me feel really good.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, it's thanks to people like you that give people other folks a dose of the real stuff. They know where to go when they want to listen to some real country music, and that's just great news.
Well, real country music fans have always been rebels. They've always, kind of bucked the system, and they liked what they liked, and it hasn't changed. But the internet and the satellite radio nowadays, we're drawing in a fan base of people that want to hear this kind of music, and it's a good source for them to go to when they don't care for the regular stuff that they're playing on the radio. Or I shouldn't say regular stuff, but the corporate stuff they're playing on the radio. It's just and nothing against it. But it's just a whole different category, and it's not my cup of tea. But I'm sure glad we're able to do this show.
Well, there's room for all kinds of music. And thankfully, the internet, as you and your listeners know, go to the internet. You can hear anything you want to hear, anytime you want to hear it. And thank goodness we have a show like yours.
Well, and thank God we have music like yours. I'll tell you what, I was tickled to death with that song. It's a great one. And folks, you can listen to that on Spotify, and Johnny's music is all available, including his DVDs, and you can read all about his fabulous career at johnnycounterfit.com. And he's also on Facebook and Twitter, so make sure you go on there and follow him and give him a like. And make sure you check out his shows. And your shows are, you have several different shows that you actually do. You have a band show and then a solo show, and you have different things that you do according to the audience, right?
Yeah, I try to choreograph the show, if you will. I don't want to suggest there's dancing. I arrange the voices and the impressions and the songs to fit the age demographic. In other words, if it's an older crowd, I'll throw in some older voice impressions. If it's younger, I'll blend some of that in. But generally speaking, at my shows, I get all age groups, even children, because it's a clean show. I add clean comedy in with the voice impressions of traditional country music singers, and a few little oldie pop singers like Sinatra and Dean Martin, and I kind of blend that in a little bit. But I'll do Johnny Cash, Vince Gill, Dwight Yoakam, Buck Owens, so it's a good blend of real country music largely, and I do a little needling of the politicians, but that's all done in good-natured fun. I never get political in my shows. I have, as an example, Bill Clinton will sing a song, and Ronald Reagan will sing a song, and I'll make some comments as President Trump and things like that. But it's just all good-natured fun. But most of it is a concert of just traditional country music done in the way that they were recorded. And it kind of takes people back and forth through the last 50, maybe 60 years of their lives. And it's kind of like they're reminiscing. It's kind of like time travel.
Sure, sure. Well, you certainly never run out of material, that's for sure.
Oh, that's true.
That's great. Well, we were talking before we got on air, and the first time that I was really aware of your talent and your voice was you did a guest session on a George Jones album.
Yes. Well, as it happened, I got a call from George Jones' producer, and George wanted to know, and of course the producer and George Jones himself were at the studio when I got the call. Johnny Cash had been scheduled to do the recording session on this George Jones song, and on the song was George, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, Bobby Bare. And Cash couldn't make it because he was ill. So George wanted me to come down and do my impression of Johnny Cash on the recording, and I said sure, because I'd worked with George Jones before on the road, that sort of thing. And so that afternoon I was down there in the recording studio, and boy, what an honor that was to be on this George Jones cut with his friends, and it turned out so well. In fact, about 3 years ago, now that song came out I think in 1997. But about 3 years ago, there was an article done in a magazine based in the UK, and some people had found out that I had done the Johnny Cash impression on there, and it wasn't Johnny Cash. Now, my name is on the album on the back cover, so it wasn't a deception kind of thing. But people just took it for granted, to my great honor, that it was Johnny Cash, and so they wrote a whole article on it. And I get a call from this magazine in England, in fact, talking about they wanted to interview me and ask me how all that came about. So it was so interesting that, so many years later, this little article had arisen, a little article that was 2 or 3 pages. But there've been quite a dust-up over this thing. Some people were insulted. All these years, I thought it was Johnny Cash. Well, my goodness, it was as I said, on the album back cover, so it's not like we were deceiving anybody.
Right.
So,
well, I remember hearing it the first time and thinking it was Cash, and then as I was reading, because I thought, I knew he was ill at the time, and I thought, boy, he sounds pretty good, and then I heard that it was you. So that's the first time I heard of Johnny Counterfit. So I had to go look you up, man, and find some more of your music. It was pretty cool, and I got to tell you. From a singer standpoint, you have a tremendous range and control in your voice to be able to do all these, not only these impressions that you do, but the songs. You go from Johnny Cash to Vince Gill. Man, that's a pretty wide range, my friend.
Well, thank you. One time I was doing my voice impression of Johnny Cash, and I was on the Grand Ole Opry, and I was doing a Vince Gill song as Johnny Cash, and I decided to add my impression of Vince Gill on the song, and so I was kind of doing a duet with myself, and I looked over to the side of the stage of the Opry, and Vince Gill is standing there looking at me. So when I got done, he said, "Hey, Johnny, that was great, but could you man me up a little?" He was good-natured about it. Everybody loves Vince Gill because he's such a nice, sincere man, and I had great fun with that. The audience went nuts because they saw Vince Gill watching me do this, and so it was really a great Grand Ole Opry moment.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you if you'd had people that you impersonate, if you'd had them sitting in the audience, and that's pretty cool.
Well, I've done years ago. I did my voice impression of Johnny Cash for Johnny Cash and June Carter.
Oh wow!
Sang "I Walk the Line" to them, and at the time they were planning on shooting the movie "Walk the Line," and Johnny Cash was asked later on who they were going to get to sing the songs, and Johnny Cash said, "Well, if they don't use my recordings, I want Johnny Counterfeit to do it. He's the best I've ever seen."
Wow.
And I don't have to tell you or your listeners that was really an honor and a highlight in my career that Johnny Cash thought that much of what I did, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, of all the ones that you do, I think that one's probably the favorite of folks, and you certainly look a lot like him, and your hair and everything, when he was in his younger days, and you've definitely got the mannerisms down. How do you?
Well, listen, I wish the producers had thought so, because the producers of the movie decided to use Joaquin Phoenix singing the songs, and so that would have been another step. But anyway, I didn't do the singing on the movie, but getting that compliment from Johnny Cash was really a top thing.
Oh, absolutely. When you do your voices, how do you go about studying these people and learning how to do these? What's your process?
Well, sometimes they're just president of the United States, and I just watch them on the news. And then I can sing a song as former President Bill Clinton, "Go away, little girl, go away, little girl." But I study them on television, of course, now on the internet and recordings, and I just listen and watch, try to get the mannerisms. It's really an acting job. I'm acting out a part of these characters, and I try to look like them without doing any makeup change. I try to make the facial expressions and the body language, just kind of put it all together. Because in my show, I'll do something like 90 minutes or so with my band, and I'll probably do 25 or 30 different characters. Singers, wow. Politicians, actors, things like that. Wow. And sometimes me and John Wayne will do a little poetry. Well, that's right, Pilgrim. Well, just get me started and I'll finish.
I love it. One of my favorite ones that you do is Archie and Edith Bunker, and it's amazing again that you can switch voices. And
oh, jeez, you want me in the dingbat, huh? Edith, get over here. I'm right here, Archie. This is Scott on the blower, huh? How do you do, Scott? It's nice to talk to you.
It's nice to talk to you too, Edith. You sound wonderful. That's great. I absolutely love that. I love that. And, your shows, I mean, if you can't come away from a Johnny Counterfeit show and not be entertained, then there's just something really wrong with you. It's there's something for everybody. I love that.
Promise that, yes.
Well, you have some great gospel music, too. One of the songs that I like and have played on my country gospel show on Sundays is called Send God an Instant Message Every Day.
I wanted to write something absolutely topical, things that are going on today, and I started thinking about what if people could send God an instant message? And again, it's one of those ideas that inspired me, so I sat down and started writing the words to it, and that's the result. You don't need to own a keyboard to get your message sent, and it doesn't even matter how much logon time you've spent.
That's right. That's
But
right.
it's almost a prayer, send God an instant message every day. And I hope people really take to that.
It's a good song. And another gospel one that you were actually on this recording too with Merle Haggard. We talked about this before the interview, Cabin in the Hills.
Yeah, that was, went into the studio, and all I knew at this particular moment, and it was a studio here in Nashville, all I knew that we were going to do some backup singing on Merle Haggard's new album entitled Cabin in the Hills. And so we laid down the background vocals. We were all guest artists on it. And the engineer asked me to stick around afterward, and so everybody left. The other artists left. And Merle Haggard was on the phone. And so they said, "Come here, Johnny. Merle wants to talk to you." So I got on the phone with Merle, and we were talking and laughing and joking around. And he said, "Hey," he said, "would you do your Johnny Cash impression on this cut Cabin in the Hills on the single?" I said, "Sure, I'd be glad to." And that's really how that came about. So I went back there, and they kept Haggard on the line, and I went out and laid it down, and man, he just loved it.
Wow.
And it's there. And again, I'm on the album cover, on the back cover, as doing that, and so there's no deception involved. But it was great fun to be on these recordings with these iconic performers like that. So I've really been blessed in so many ways.
Absolutely. Well, it's a testament to the talent that you have that's being recognized by people like that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, you are also an author, and I haven't had a chance to read your book, but I'm going to order it, and because it looks very interesting to me. It's a book about the JFK assassination.
Well, I'm a great student of history. I love American history.
Me too.
And one of my favorite topics, of course, is President Kennedy. And I've studied at great length for a couple of decades or more his administration, and, of course, that terrible incident in Dallas, the assassination. And so one day I was thinking, what if he had not been killed in Dallas? What would have happened with the remainder of his political life? And so I started thinking, well, if I could go back in time, this is what I would do to prevent the assassination. And that's what the book entails, about how I go back in time and how I sneak aboard Air Force One and hide until it takes off from the short flight from Fort Worth into Dallas. And then during the flight, I come out of hiding, and of course I'm tackled by the Secret Service, and I try to convince everybody on board, including the President and First Lady, that I'm not any threat, and I really need to talk with the President alone. And so I finally, through a little bit of trying, I got to talk with the President alone, because I didn't want to let everybody else know that I was from the future. And so what happens from then, I finally convince him at length that I'm from the future. We start talking about what's about to happen, et cetera, et cetera. And so we land in Dallas, and the President decides not to go through with the motorcade. So when that happens, other things start happening, additional plans and plots to get to the President. And so a lot of that is in there. But it's not a big book. It's a little less than 15,000 words, but it's a good read, and everybody seems to enjoy it that has responded to me on it. And so I think your listeners, if they like to read a fictional story blended with facts from history, I took a lot of things that are true history, and I blended it in my story. So as a result, I try to let people believe that I'm actually talking to the President and First Lady, and I'm talking about some things that happened during that time. And so people that perhaps were living during that time, they'll recall some of these products that I mentioned, some of these incidents that I recall, And it's really kind of an intriguing story, and I think they'll like it.
It sounds really exciting. I'm anxious to read it. I think it's right up my alley. It's something I would be real interested in. Actually, it sounds like it'd make a good movie.
Well, I'm hoping so.
Yeah.
You know, I published it and released it November 22nd of last year. But the interesting story about that is I actually wrote the bulk of it in 1993 for the 30th anniversary of the assassination, and it was quite short, but I submitted it to a publishing company anyway, and they wrote back and said, well, the story's, you know, there's not enough pages in it, not enough words in it, and so I stuck it back in a file, in my file cabinet, in a folder, and pretty much forgot about it until last year, because I was involved in my career and raising a couple of children and you know, just handling life. And I start writing another book last year, something about the assassination, and I recalled, well, wait a second, why don't I just go ahead and re-examine that book that I wrote called JFK, Averting the Assassination? And so I got the file out and I started reading, and I thought, hey, this is a pretty good story. I can make it better, and I added to it. And as a result, voila, as they say in France, I had myself a book and got it published, and here we are.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Well, that's available, folks, at johnnycounterfit.com, as well as Johnny's music and DVDs and all sorts of great things on there, and I encourage you to visit his website. And also tour dates, including you've got a pretty cool show coming up here in Texas on August the 12th. It's the Texas Country Music Hall of Fame show.
Yes, we're inducting Kenny Rogers into the Texas Country Music Hall of Fame. Kenny's going to be there. He's going to do a show. I'm doing a little bit of a show, and let's see, a number of other people are going to be there performing as well. So it's going to be a full evening.
Fantastic. Tickets for that, folks, can be gotten at the tcmhof.com, and we'll put that information on our Facebook page as well. That'll be a fantastic show. And you were also inducted into the America's Old Time Country Music Hall of Fame down in Texas last year. Congratulations.
Thank you. That was quite an honor, because the people that they induct are strictly traditional country artists, and so I'm kind of in a special group of people there in that Hall of Fame, and I sure thank them for that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to play a couple of your songs. We played it at the beginning of the show, but I'm going to play it again. It's called I Hate Corporate Country. I want to play that for folks. And then a couple of girls ago. I love this song, too. What a great title.
Well, that if we have time, the interesting story about that coming out of the pencil, so to speak, I'm driving on my way to do the state fair in West Virginia, and we're going down the highway about, 73, 74 miles an hour, and I start thinking about this gal that I went with years ago, and I still think about her quite often. And again, the title just came to me. Why am I starting to think about this gal again? Because really, I got over her a couple of girls ago. And I start writing while we're traveling down the road, and before we got to the state fair, the song was done. And so it really happened that fast. That's a true story.
Wow, it's a good song too, and it's a real solid, good traditional country song. I like that.
It's going to be part of an album. Both of those songs you mentioned will be part of an album that I have coming out. I think probably by the holiday season this year, Thanksgiving or into Christmas, called Johnny Counterfit, Songs I've Written and Recorded in My Own Voice. So
awesome.
I thought I'd record an album using my own voice so people find out that I have my own voice.
You certainly do, and it's a good one, too.
Thank you.
Well, it sounds like the holidays are going to be something to look forward to. Hopefully we'll have you up here in Michigan and have a new album. So I hope that when that time rolls around, you'll take some time and come back on the show.
I'd love it, and I'll certainly send you the album.
All right. Sounds great. Well, again, JohnnyCounterfit.com, folks, is the place to visit. And Johnny and President Clinton, Archie and Edith, Vince Gill, Johnny Cash, thank you all for being on My Kind of Country.
Well, Nancy and I want to thank you, too, and
I'll send you a jar of jelly beans.
Thank you, President Reagan. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Johnny. Very nice talking with you. Here's some great Johnny Counterfeit music for you as we continue right here on My Kind of Country.